All right, we are here today with Craig Welburn, author of The Ashen Levels, which I read recently and it was wonderful. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently working on.
Oh, hi, AG. Well, my name's Craig and I'm living in Spain at the moment. I've just finished writing The Ashen Levels, which took me a couple of years. And now I'm finally getting around to the next piece, which I'm taking advantage of the school summer holidays and trying to get going with that now in the next couple of months, really.
Okay, so is this going to be a follow-on?
No, I haven't penciled out following on ideas in the same world as The Ashen in the future. But this book's really completely different. It's going to be a different universe. It's going to follow various points of view characters, including some of the antagonists. And completely different. The world's slightly more based in reality. It's not quite as magical, but yeah, different challenge and sort of start with a fresh slate, so to speak.
Okay, very fun. Is there going to be sort of epic adventure type of thing or world-ending type of thing?
Without going into too much detail, it's going to be most of the story is going to be based around a town.
Okay.
And it's a little bit world-ending, but nobody really believes it because it's, as I say, it's more rooted in reality.
Right.
There are religious sects and kind of doomsayers predicting these things, but nobody really believes it. And it's going to be following multiple points of view. So one of the main characters is a thief, and obviously he's more concerned with the day-to-day getting by. He doesn't really pay any credence to these doomsayers. And there's various other characters that come into the mix, but it's looking more like it's going to be a duology, so two books. I'm assuming that towards this latter half, they're going to need to go out of this town, so there will be a little bit of travelling involved. Not quite as much as in The Ashen. I really wanted to get a bit of feeling for a bit of a close-knit society and have different relationships going on within this town. So completely different, really.
Yeah, it does sound, and it sounds fascinating. Now, talking about The Ashen Levels, so you said it took 2 years or so to do? How much planning and work went into that?
Well, the first year was pretty much the first draft, which was actually surprisingly easy because I was just kind of going with the flow and enjoying myself. And then the second year was the more tedious second and third drafts where I had to be going through playing it all in. So
yeah, second and third drafts are So that was very extensive and well written, and everything was woven together. So did you intend that to happen, or was it just happenstance?
A little bit of both, really. It started off as a very simple idea for a short story. In fact, it was just going to be a very short story called Campfire, and we were going to be listening from the campfire's point of view to different travellers coming and telling their stories around the fire. So I started doing this, and the first character that happened to sit by the fire was Balaguer, and I just thought, well, let's just carry on seeing where this goes. It was kind of, when I said earlier it was easy to write, it's because I didn't know exactly what was going on, and neither did the main character. So we were both kind of in the same boat, and that made it very interesting because I didn't really know what was around the next corner either. And there's various sections of the book where, for example, the second part where he's sort of island hopping. It was kind of good fun to think, what's he going to find on this next island? It's kind of like my ode to Homer's Odyssey in a way, that part of the book. So I was very much along for the ride, but I did kind of have some ideas to how it was going to end. A very vague arc, but 90% of it was a surprise to me. But one without going into too many spoilers, one of the main characters doesn't come in until about halfway through. And I wasn't quite sure on how important he was going to be until I got to the end. So that's why with the second and third drafts, I had to sort of tie it all together and just make sure it's watertight, really.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your editing process, because second and third drafts are always fun to do, and everyone has a different process.
Exactly. Well, I did kind of enjoy the process because it allowed me to go back and see things like I knew a lot more at that point. For example, the word Ashen didn't even exist until nearly halfway through. I originally just called them Wanderers, and then so going back through the other drafts, I had to obviously alter quite a lot of stuff. I enjoyed the second draft because the first draft had been such a whirlwind. It was kind of quite enjoyable going back through it again. But then the third draft was a little bit more tedious, nitpicking, just finding things. And even then, after many rereads, you still notice little things that you missed. So it's incredible, really.
Yeah. So what's your least favorite part about this whole writing process? That includes the publishing process as well. But
Right. Good. I'm glad you said that, because it probably is the post-writing part that's been the most difficult for me. I kind of lived in my writer's bubble, very solitary, just getting on with it and expecting that when it was all done and dusted, put it out there and people would read it. But of course, it's easier said than done. So it's been definitely a massive learning curve, the whole post-writing side. As I said, I was living in a false reality, and since living here, it's been quite good, really. I've made quite a lot of contacts, and definitely had my eyes opened for the next time I come around to do this. So I think I'll be a lot more prepared.
Okay, and so what's your primary means of marketing then? Social media, that sort of a thing?
Pretty much, yeah, exclusively social media, nearly all of it on Facebook.
Okay.
I have tried dabbling in other things like BookBub and Twitter, and I have a website, but probably the most success, certainly the most contact with people, has been via Facebook.
Interesting, because I know a lot of people are having problems with Facebook. I think that's mostly to do with their ad system, which I haven't explored yet.
Right. So. Yeah, I'm not sure how successful it's been, but I've definitely met some really nice people, and I'm involved in some really nice groups. And as a point of view of learning things and meeting people, Facebook's been virtually everything for me. With regards to sales, I'm not quite so sure if it's worked that well, but it's okay.
Yeah, well, I think meeting people and making connections is probably 90% of the process at this point. We no longer rely on those print ads and publishers to do everything. Sigh. Oh well.
No. Well, I just came back from England, visiting my parents for a week, and it was quite cool because I dropped off I've got two books. The one before the Ashen Levels was called The Linguist. It's very short.
Ooh, okay.
And I actually delivered them to the local library by hand. And it was kind of quite weird because I grew up in a small town, and it was sort of nice to go and give something back to them because I used to use the library as a kid, and my grandparents used the library all the time. So going back to what you were saying about social media, it's kind of nice to just go into a shop and hand over a paper copy and say, this is my book. I'm giving it to a library, just let people read it. So that felt really good.
Okay, tell me a little bit about this Linguist book, because I am a linguist and I'm always interested in these sorts of things. Okay,
well, it's kind of strange how that came about, because I was actually writing another book at the time, and which was I got a little bit bogged down in this book with all the planning, and then I started doing a master's to study to become a teacher in Spain. And one of the modules on the master's was about linguistics. So I was kind of studying this, And at the same time, I remember reading an article somewhere about a feral child that had been discovered in a cave. So
Yeah.
those two ideas kind of fused, and then I had the idea for the story, and within probably a week, I had the story written.
Wow.
But basically, it's this linguist who has this idea that by discovering the roots of the primordial language,
Hmm.
it would be the language able to communicate with the gods. So when
Ah.
this feral child was discovered, he believes because he's been untainted by humans, if he
Hmm.
can use him, he may be able to connect to the original language. And it's kind of a dark tale, but it's kind of a
Well,
Frankenstein-y kind of scenario going on, really.
actually not that far off from reality. There was, oh, I want to say in the 19th century, maybe 18th century, not quite sure on the date, but there was a sort of wealthy guy who said, okay, I want to know the roots of the original language. So he gave two twins as infants to a caretaker and said, you are to raise them, you will not speak to them ever. They must be raised completely away from any language and see what they started to do, whether or not they would speak. And it turns out that they did, but it was things that they had overheard because there were other people that they had accidentally interacted with. So
Right.
these experiments are no longer allowed,
No.
obviously.
Yeah, no, it's I hadn't heard of that story, but it's kind of similar along
Yeah.
those lines. It does get kind of a little bit dark. It's set in a fantasy world, but
Mm-hmm.
very, very light fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But there are kind of some old spirits involved,
Mm.
but not necessarily the ones that he was hoping to find.
Aha.
And there are a few little twists at the end, but my favourite part about that book was their relationship, because
Mm.
obviously at first this kid's kind of more animal than human, and he's locked in the cellar because he's trying to bite them, and then in the end they get him up to the table to eat with them, and it's quite nice, their relationship, but there is a dark twist at the end. So
Well, I will have to go and check that out because that is very interesting. So another book to read, hooray!
sorry about that.
Well, my list never ends, and I am actually okay with that. All right. So moving a little bit away from your writing, is there a story out there that you wish you had written?
Oof, good question. Obviously, I grew up with like the beginnings of fantasy. So I started off with Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and The Hobbit. That was like my gateway into the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then I went down probably a similar route as many people, starting with my David Eddings and Terry Brooks and Raymond E. Feist. And then I had a big break from fantasy for a while. When I went to university, I was studying more classical literature.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until probably like my late 20s, early 30s when I really got back massively into fantasy, and I started reading back through all of the classics. And I think I discovered then my favourite writer, which is, I would probably have to say, is Jack Vance.
Oh.
And I really enjoyed his tales of the Dying Earth, but
Mm-hmm.
then I read the Leonas trilogy, and to answer your question, that would be the book that I wish I'd written.
Okay. Oh, all of the classic fantasies out there. Oh, they're so addicting, and I need to read through all of them again.
That's it. I'm trying to balance reading all of the new indie authors.
Yeah.
I'm involved in an indie summer reading challenge, so
Oh,
I'm trying to read, I don't know, quite a few books this summer. But then I
okay.
have my backlog of classics that I'm trying to read, and then also other books that I've read ages ago and I really want to get back to. So it's just never ending, really.
Right. So this indie summer challenge, how many books do you think you'll get done?
Well, I'm trying to read one a week, and at the moment, I've kept up with that. Luckily, I'm on school summer holidays, so it's not
Yeah.
too bad. But some people are really, really fast readers, and I'm in awe of people that are reading like 10 books a week. I'm not quite sure how it's humanly possible. I wish I could do it.
I can't explain how it's humanly possible, but I can certainly tell you that I have been doing it for years.
Wow. Yeah, I would love to be able to do that because I've got such a long to be read list. I feel like I'm treading water sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it got to the point when I was a kid where I was forbidden to read books at social events. So, oops. Oh well. Oh well. Okay. So going through, if you're doing more of the game lit, which is what the Ashen Levels was, so how do you go about creating that? Because that's not something I've actually written before, so I don't know how it's done.
Okay, it's a good question because I hadn't done it before either, and I hadn't actually read any apart from old fighting fantasy books when I was really young. You know, the choose your own adventure books.
Yeah.
As I say, it started off with a very basic idea about people around a campfire, and then from there I started to imagine the magic system. And I am a big gamer. I love my open world role playing games.
Yeah.
So then I started to think, well, maybe this could work as the magic system using the gaming mechanics. So yeah, basically in a game you will do a quest and you will get experience, which will allow you to level up. But it's very similar in the way the magic system works in the Ashen Levels. They have to gather smoke by completing oaths, which they will then use to pay the piper to level up. The tricky thing was how to motivate these characters, because obviously when you play a game, you're playing it for enjoyment. Well, there's not much that these guys are enjoying about doing this. So
probably not.
So how it gets tied in is by making it like an addiction for them. There are more underlying reasons, as you'll know when you get to the end, but it's basically it's tied in with they become addicted to gathering the smoke, and it's also a means of survival and one-upmanship on the other people that are always trying to trick them. Another interesting element with the game side of it was having a little bit of fun, because I've been playing quite a lot of games recently, and there's always things in games that are like glitches. So I tried to include some of those in my book as well. So simple questions like how can you have a pouch which is seemingly bottomless, but when you put one tiny thing more than you should in there, suddenly you can't move?
Yeah.
Or why is my horse always there? Yeah, these kind of weird things. Similar to I'm not giving too much away here, but at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the book, he's kind of shrouded in fog. There's no map included in the book, which I did purposely, because the world is just lit by a tiny fire, and then from the fire he discovers there's a village called Mudfoot, and then he hears about another continent, and the world grows as he discovers it. It's not all just handed to him on a plate.
Right. I did notice the map thing, and I definitely needed a map. I'm one of those people who is geographically challenged, so maps are terribly useful.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much, but there's a section much later on in the book where Balaguer actually sees a map for the first time.
Yes.
And he thinks, now I can see where I've travelled. And I did toy with the idea of including a map, but putting it in that page. So not giving it the readers at the start of the book, but giving them access to the map at the same time he has access to a map. And I thought about that for a long time, but in the end I decided to leave it.
Well, I think it works just fine, except for people like me who are really terrible with directions. So, oops. Okay. So it sounds like you've been doing writing and fantasy and all that stuff for ages. So how did you actually get into writing this epic?
Well, as I say, this one I don't know, it came off the back of the Linguist, really. I was actually writing another book. I'm living in Spain now. I went to London for a couple of years. And when I was in London, I began writing another book, which had a lot of planning going on. So trying to work out the religions of the world and the history. And I got a little bit bogged down. So then The Linguist happened. And then I was going to go back to the other book. I had the idea for the short story. And before I know it, 2 years later, I'd finished The Ashen. The work in progress that I'm doing now is actually, I've gone back to the book I was writing in London, but I realised that it wasn't as good as I thought it was at the time. So I've taken out a few of the characters I liked. I've taken out the setting. I've grabbed some of the things I did about the religion, and then those things I took and I've put them in a completely new story. So I'm sort of recycling ideas I had earlier. But The Ashen it just kind of grew out of control, really. It wasn't ever intended to be that big.
Well, it's great fun to read through, but it does take longer than one would expect. So, forewarning. But so how many ideas do you work on simultaneously? Because it sounds like you've got several possibilities going.
Yeah, well, I've got a list of books that are on back burners. I try to always work on one at a time because outside of writing, I have a lot of things going on. So I think if I don't focus, I'm never going to make any progression. So yeah, I have the book I'm writing now, which I would love to get out next year. I do have more ideas for the Ashen's world in the future. No, I'm not going to give anything away, but I've got a few ideas bubbling away there.
Oh boy.
Also, when I was at university, I read quite a lot of magical realism. I really enjoy, I don't know if you've heard Isabel Allende, The House of Spirits.
I have not heard of that one.
Or 100 Years of Solitude.
Yes.
Those kind of books I really got into at university. So my plan was always to write a kind of magical realism standalone. That's kind of on the back burner as well. And a few other short stories that might become more than short stories. But as I say, I'm just trying to focus on one thing at a time. And I have like a list of things just there waiting.
Right. Well, it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you. Good luck with all of that. So, okay. In terms of the fantasy world, I know it's expanding quite dramatically to all these different subgenres. Where do you think it's going to go in the future?
It's an interesting question. I suppose if you'd asked somebody the same question 30 or 40 years ago, Tolkien or someone, even maybe they couldn't have predicted game lit or lit RPG, because that's a relatively I guess it's been around longer than we imagined, but compared to epic and sword and sorcery and things like that, I would say it's slightly newer, because a lot more people these days are gamers.
Right.
And people that are writing now probably grew up in the time when fantasy was popular, but not as popular as it is now. It's a very good question. I've noticed a few more people splicing sci-fi and fantasy, or having fantasy in post-apocalyptic worlds. So there's elements of sci-fi buried there. It's difficult to say, because at the moment there seems so much fantasy out there. After Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and now Game of Thrones, I think it's just been a bit of a boom.
Yes.
So it'll be very interesting to see how we can keep making it fresh and coming up with new ideas.
That is always the challenge, but given how many people are writing and keep writing, I don't think we'll have any lack of ideas.
No, it's encouraging. I've just recently started getting into indie writers because I'm one myself. I thought, let's start reading what else is out there, and I think I've struck a rich vein, because there's just so much good stuff being made, and it's just out there under the radar, but really incredible.
Do you have a favorite one that you've read recently?
That's a very difficult question. Last year I was really enjoying Brandon Barr's work, which was very nice, and I've just read a book that was actually the winner of the Spiff Bow last year, Orconomics, which was actually quite funny because I haven't read any fantasy comedy for a long time, ever since I used to be into Terry Pratchett as a teenager. And that was, I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to, and it was in the end, it was quite a lot deeper than I thought it was going to be as well. So just off the top of my head, I'm going to say those two, but there's so many, and so many I need to read as well.
Yes, I will have to go check those out. Again, more books to read, hooray! Okay, sort of back to your writing. What's the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
Well, I'd say my covers, because obviously the old adage, don't judge a book by its cover, is very untrue, really, because many people wouldn't read a book unless the cover had drawn them in the first place. So I think it's a very important stage. Luckily, I didn't spend too much money on that, because it's a friend, one of my good friends from Germany, who worked with me on the covers, and we had many long Skypes discussing the details, tweaking it. So pretty much the covers, he read the books as well before he did the covers. So there's certain scenes that are on the covers that are very similar to what I had imagined. And yeah, he's a really good friend, and he put up with my pickiness. So luckily we're still friends.
Good friends are very valuable. And I like the covers quite a lot. They're very a different style than what I normally see these days. I guess it's sort of different from the trend, and hopefully will last a lot longer.
Definitely, it's slightly more surreal, I think. And that was his style. So when I started seeing what else he was doing, I thought that could work. And yeah, we came back and forth a few times, and in the end, we were both happy with it. So yeah, I'm pleased with them.
I like them quite a lot, and covers and editors seem to be the things that indie authors say, yes, you should definitely go for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, invest in a good editor, and probably PR as well, post writing, because if you're like me, and you don't really know what you're doing and have many contacts, then I think it's definitely a good way to go, because I was kind of treading water for a while.
I'm not sure any of us really know what we're doing.
Oh, that's good. Good to know.
For people trying to get into the industry, besides covers and editors, is there anything that they should do, or traps that they should look out for? Excuse me.
I guess it depends which route you're going to go down, whether you're going to try to approach traditional publishers. I decided to not do that. I just wanted to go indie straight away, because I wanted more control over my writing, no pressure, and then if things can start to work, then I can be more in charge. So I would decide first and foremost where you want to be. With regards to writing, just enjoy yourself. I think if you're enjoying writing a book, then probably somebody's going to enjoy reading it. So definitely, if it's feeling too forced, if you're really struggling, maybe try and have a break and come back to it from a different angle. That would be the best advice I could give as a writer, is just enjoy what you're doing and have fun.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if I'm in the best position to give advice for the marketing side of it, but join some groups. There's plenty of people out there, loads of good advice, and everyone's surprisingly friendly. I feel really at home in some of the readers groups, and anytime you have a question, there's always somebody there with an answer. So definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, I think you have gone through all of my questions without me asking most of them. So,
Right. Yeah,
is there
I think I tend to go off on tangents, and that's exactly how I write as well. I think I start writing one thing and then it's something else.
That's what makes it fun. All right. Is there anything else you want to say, writing related or not?
Not really. I can't think of anything. No, just if you have read my books, then thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed them. And keep reading, keep supporting indie writers because there's so much good stuff out there.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. It was good fun talking with you.